Welcome to WVTC TV Network, capturing family moments in real time, bringing families closer together from the comforts of home. We are unleashing something different to the world. Start your subscription today for the low price of $4.99 per month or $55 annually. Go to www.wvtctvnetwork.com to sign up today. WVTC TV Network is streaming live on 8 different platforms. You can easily download the WVTC TV Network app on the Apple Store, Play Store, Roku, Fire TV, and more. Here at WVTC TV, we have access to movies that everyone can enjoy, including independent films, Sons of a Preacher and a Good Thing, Treasures of Life, the epic drama, The Passion of the Christ, and the box office hit Madagascar Escape to Africa. Remember, go to www.wvtctvnetwork.com and sign up today.
Welcome back to You Plant, We Water. I'm your girl, Dr. Toya Flowers, and this is my special co-host,
Trisha Flowers.
And as you know, here we dive deep into the world of love, connection, and thriving relationships, trying to bring together our faith, mental health, and enhancing relationship satisfaction. All right? So we're glad to have you again. We have covered a range of topics from communication to the 5 love languages. We've talked about when to see who. Do you go for spiritual counseling, mental health counseling? And today we are talking about managing conflict constructively, if there is such a way to do so, right? No, there is. And so what I'm thinking we'll do is Trisha and I are just going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to go over some things we think, we're going to talk about things and discuss whether they're a myth or a fact as it relates to managing conflict constructively. And we'll go from there. So let's dive right in. I'm going to pause and see, Trisha, do you have any things you've heard, or what have you heard in your many years about how best to manage conflict, specifically in relationships, right? So it could be a romantic relationship. We'll focus mostly on that, but even parent-child relationships, things like that.
For conflict resolution, I think one of the things that I have heard is, to come in with a calm head so you can hear the other person. I don't know if that's true or not. That's so being able to hear, making sure you're listening to yourself and making sure you're checking in and hear what's going on.
I'm gonna pause you so we can see. So you've heard somewhere through the grapevine, and the reason we're doing it this way is there's so much information out there. You can TikTok, YouTube, Google anything, and you can hear a gazillion different tips, techniques. So Trisha mentioned a great one, right? Trying to go in with a calm head. Is that a myth or fact? That's a fact, right? If you can do that, you definitely should try to go in with as calm as you can, right? Now, in full transparency, if you're in conflict, that's probably hard to do. You might start out calm and then you may feel yourself escalating. So we'll go from there. But so much so, being calm and level-headed, one of the things that we as clinicians or therapists share with our clients is trying to set aside, almost schedule a time to talk about something rather than talking about it when it just came up, right? Like, hey, this morning when we were trying to get the kids out to school, I didn't like the way you were talking to me. Can we talk? Can we go out to dinner and talk about it? Right? The go out to dinner, that's another little trick I threw in there, but we'll more. But schedule a time, right? After work, at dinner. So that was good. Any other pieces you've heard of? And I've got some too. So the pressure's not all on you. And before we say more, if you're listening, please put in the comments. What have you heard? We will talk about that as well.
So one of the things that I personally like to do, I don't know if this is healthy or not, and I don't know if I should be sharing it, but
share it.
One of the things that I tend to do is I want the thing to go away. So I'm just not going to address it. I'm just going to just pray that everything goes away and all is well.
Ooh, you listed 2 of them that I put on my own little list. Not address it, right? Just see if it'll go away and pray. All right, let's start with not addressing it. Is that a constructive way to manage conflict, right? So maybe you're just like super hurt and disappointed. And so you're like, you know what? I'm not even going to say that. I'm just going to try to dead it. That's what I say. And move on. That's a myth. It will not work, right? Because what will happen if you do not at some point address the conflict, there's this sneaky little thing that will build in and that will begin to develop and grow. And it's called resentment, right? You're going to need to address it at some point. One, you're cheating your partner out of the opportunity to provide you with what you would really want. If you don't tell them what's going on, how can they do better? And then you're sitting around like, they should know. They're not going to know. Nobody reads your mind. Nobody is the same as you. So it's tempting, right? Because sometimes we know the topic that we want to bring up. We already know that, ooh, this is a powder keg. This is going to, as soon as I say, I don't know, my mother or whatever, or mother-in-law, I don't know, or my father-in-law, I know that's going to set it off. But we still want to try to find ways to have a conversation to make the invisible visible, because when it's visible, we can fix it. So love that one, right? And it's tempting. I still do it. I still will be like, I'm just not going to say nothing. But eventually it's almost like, thinking of like a poison that seeps through your pores, you're right. Like you could, even if you don't say anything, that other person can pick up on it. Like something's off, right? So there's that. And then the big one you said, which we are here combining faith and mental health and relationships, is pray on it. This one's a tricky one, right? Is it a myth? Is it a fact? Well, of course, prayer works, right? God is able, that which is impossible with men is possible through God. So of course prayer could work, and God can decide that you don't have to do any of the things I'm telling you. It's done. He could just resolve it. You could wake up and it's no longer an issue. That is true. And at the same time, faith without works is dead. So if that does not happen, you need to do what you know how to do, meaning use your communication skills, think about your partner's love language, and some of these tips and strategies that we're saying to address the conflict while still having faith that God will do exactly what you know he can and will do. So that one's yes, right? I'm like, God can do anything, and at the same time, equip yourself. Work on making sure you're the best partner you can possibly be, the best wife, the best husband. And part of doing that is figuring out how to approach conflict in your relationship. So I love that one, right? That's the only one where I'm going to say myth and fact, right? Because God is God. Do you have another one? You want to hear some of mine? You let me know.
Let's hear yours.
Well, I love what you said about prayer. Like I said, that was one of them. Here's one, myth or fact. And you can chime in and see, what do you think?
Okay.
Right? Just say you're sorry. Like, just, you know what? I'm sorry.
I'm chiming in, and I think that's a myth.
It's definitely a myth. Just saying sorry, one, Okay, let me see. I gotta break this one down because this is a big one. It sounds like, yeah, that should work. But there's two pieces. One, you genuinely have to be sincere and really feel that there is something that you could have done differently. Then you can say sorry. But more than saying sorry, we want to work towards an apology. What's the difference between an apology and saying sorry?
We don't know.
No, I give my mother credit for this. She was good at this and had us working on this when we were like 8. Right? We'll just say, "Oh, I'm sorry." Just say, "Sorry for what?" Have you ever heard that? So what are you sorry for? Now we're moving into an apology, right? A sorry can be like something we just throw on, a Band-Aid. And yes, a Band-Aid can work. If you have a cut and you put a Band-Aid on it, it will stop the bleeding. But what if you needed to put peroxide or alcohol to prevent an infection and all you did was put the Band-Aid? That's what an apology. It's the whole thing. So when apologizing, I want to think about what is it that we could have done differently? And then apologize for that. And you may or may not even ever use the word sorry. You might say something like, "You know what? I've been thinking about it and I really wish I had listened to what you were saying instead of getting into my feelings. Can you forgive me?" I never said sorry, but I did give a sincere apology.
I love that.
You like that?
We need to tip. Sometimes we think we're doing things and we're not. So that's why I wanted to get a little more clarity because we think, "Oh, well, I've apologized." Not necessarily. So if you don't know why you did something, then you're not really apologizing. You're maybe empathizing or trying to get rid of the situation, but not being sincere in your apology. So I love that.
Well said, right? And because I like what you're saying. And so I think about, even if you do say, "I'm sorry," even if you didn't mean it, right? Maybe thinking of it as levels, right? So you want to graduate to the top. At least saying sorry, you're trying to manage the conflict. You may not mean it, which means you might get more conflict. Then you move up to, "I'm gonna offer an apology." Hopefully you mean it. When you get up here, you offer a sincere apology where you've reflected and thought about what it is you could have done differently. You've graduated. You are the master. You're the king or the queen of the conflict resolution. Okay. Now, that often takes time, right? Like sometimes in the heat of a conflict. And I want you to think about when you really at odds with someone, when that argument is really going down, or your child has really pushed that last nerve, worked that last nerve, and you're ready to like get with them, right? Are you in that moment like, "You know what? I'd like to offer you an apology because if I had let work go before I came here." No, you're probably not, right? Okay, so that was one I had. Here's another. Using text messages.
Okay.
Think does that help or hurt? Myth or fact as far as managing conflict constructively? What do we think?
I'm going to go with fact.
Okay, I like it. It's safe, maybe based off what you're saying.
The reason why I said that is because I think that sometimes you don't need to talk to people directly. Maybe you need to have a little space. And so before we had text messages, it was a letter. And sometimes you can communicate more effectively through a letter because you have time to process what you're thinking versus just reacting.
Yes, and in those ways, you're right. But a text or a letter has to be a first step, not the only step. And that's what I heard you saying, right? Like texting, you may not have the words at that moment. I think that could be helpful. Or you write a letter because you're going to, yes, but the point is you still bring yourself back to be available for the conversation. Maybe it won't be necessary, maybe it will, but what we want to avoid and what would be a myth is thinking there's a conflict. I'll use the example of, I didn't like the way you were speaking to me this morning when we were trying to get the kids out. And so if you think I'm just going to text and be like, "Well, my bad," that may not be enough, right? There might need to be a conversation. There might be something that's underneath. And what we call it is during a conflict, especially in a couple relationship, there are symptoms that show up, right? These are the things that you argue about all the time. They are just the symptoms of a bigger problem that's underneath that, right? So I don't like the way you were talking to me is probably a symptom of I don't feel valued, right?
Okay.
There's something deeper usually underneath. And it's when we try to actually talk and get in there and do the work that some of those parts will come up. So I would agree, right? It can be a fact, but only as one of at least one other step. I wouldn't want any of us to rely on it solely. And I know that's hard. I know this is going to be a generational piece because I know that younger generations are like, I've broken up with people over a Snapchat, right? Like, boom, we're done. And I know it's different, and it's a different day and age. But what I will tell you is so much is lost when there's not words, right? We talked last week about how I could say the same word 3 different ways, and it means 3 different things. I could say what, right? And it means 3 different things. But if I just put what in the Snapchat, I'm leaving it up to, or I might be using the wrong one. I don't even know if you text in Snapchat. My son
you can do Snapchat. That is true.
See, there's that generation gap. But if I just say what, I'm leaving it up to you as far as how I feel or what the emotion is, right? So you're like, is she mad? Is she not mad? Is she cool? Is she not? So love it. All right, I'm gonna pause. You got any others coming to mind or anything that's coming to mind? And then I'll chime back in. And don't forget, put stuff in the comments if you have some thoughts.
One other thing I would like to know personally, I tend to psychoanalyze a lot during the conflict resolution. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Like, I'm always thinking of what the other person might be saying, what they might not be saying. What did they mean with the what? So
what you mean? What? No, I love that. Can you say a little bit more? You started describing what you mean by psychoanalyze. So is it the thoughts?
The thoughts, my thoughts, not the other person. This is all a conversation that I've had with myself. I don't want it to be misconstrued. It has nothing to do with anybody else. This is my thought process. And I'm like, well, what did they mean? And, what are the little small details that I've picked up on? That's the psychoanalyzing part that I'm talking about.
Right. So what I hear is you're looking for context clues and things like that, trying to understand what's going on with your partner. And at the same time, you're spending a lot of your mental energy thinking about it, right? Mm-hmm. So is that helpful, myth or fact? I would say psychoanalyzing during the conflict is not helpful, right? So that's probably a myth. But many of the things that you're doing are great conflict strategies, right? If you're listening and trying to understand the context, you're listening to understand and not to respond. Yes, yes, and yes. But, and that's why I asked you to say a little more about psychoanalyzing. If you're listening thinking, yep, they're a narcissist. Or, yep, I don't know, they just a habitual liar or whatever. Or if you're giving labels, or yep, I think they got bipolar. Clearly they depressed. Clearly your mama didn't love you. Right? If you're doing that, then we're really not listening for understanding, and we're bringing in another piece, which this is almost impossible to not do when you're in conflict with someone you care for: judgment. Right?
Okay.
You're judging, right? But it's hard not to do. It's hard not to judge, even as a professional, but it's a skill that you can learn, right? And during our training, we spend a lot of time trying to try to become a blank slate, so that when that person, because in the work that I do, yes, if it's a simple couples conflict, I don't feel any judgment because I'm not invested, right? So I'm like, oh yeah, I can be this neutral party and help understand both sides. But there are other things that come in that are very difficult when my own values are being pulled, like having maybe to work with someone who's a rapist. I'm not, by law, I can't say I'm not going to work with you, right? Because how does that rapist get better? But at the same time, it's difficult because I'm sitting there, possibly, I could be thinking like, So I have to, it's a skill, but I would say the more we can bring those things into our loved ones, the better. Because honestly, my goal is always to talk myself out of a job with my clients. I want to give you, and even in this show, I want to give you enough tools, tips, tricks, techniques that maybe you'll never have to come and see someone like me, or you'll know when to come and see someone like me and not wait too long, right? What we found in our research is that by the time a couple comes to see a counselor, they've been having problems on average for 7 years.
Wow.
That makes it, right? 7 years. That makes it really difficult for me to bring about change. And usually by the time one person is like, yes, we'll go, it's too late. Somebody already checked out. Somebody had told you they wanted to go to counseling back in year 1. And you're like, right? So I'm hoping that I can talk myself out of a job by getting us to seek help sooner. I'm on a little tangent, but if it were up to me, I would want to see every couple come to counseling when you don't have a problem at all, just like you do when you go to the doctor. You go every year just for a checkup. That would be the best. And that would be managing conflict constructively. If you knew every year, we're going to go see our therapist, we're going to set goals, we're going to talk about the things that have been well, that we don't feel have gone well, you'll be so much further and ahead of the game. But I don't know, that's just my wishful thinking.
No, you're projecting it out there into the universe and you will get it.
Yes. Come see us sooner than later. And what I do with my couples that I do work with and who, make progress and are ready to leave and don't need me anymore, with them, I do schedule check-ins, right? I let them know, okay, I want to see you in 6 months. We're just going to be checking in. I want to see you again in a year, things like that. But if the rest of us could do this, it would be fantastic. Sort of like premarital counseling. You're doing that before you technically have had an issue.
Okay, I love that. Thank you for your insight.
Well, that's what I think. It's Dr. T. Flowers' 2 cents. You may agree, you may disagree. But okay, so we talked about praying on it. We already covered that. Texting, just saying I'm sorry, not saying anything. We'll call that just sweeping it under the rug kind of a thing. Another one that I have is sleeping on it. Right? So it's like, hey, let's just sleep on it. Could that be a constructive way to manage conflict? Got any thoughts? This is a tricky one. This is like a trick question.
Me not having a counselor degree or anything.
Most people don't, so I love it. No right or wrong.
I think if you give yourself maybe a time frame, then that would be okay. But if you're just going to sleep on it for like an indefinite amount of time, we're in a danger zone. That's what I think.
She's right? She's right. So could it be a strategy? Yes. If you need space, maybe we talked about being emotionally flooded, right? So we have studied the brain. I'm about to get too deep and y'all gonna be like, why is she going too deep? But we've actually looked at the brain, and what we know is during conflicts or things like that, right? We've all heard of fight, flight, or freeze, right? And what's happening is, this is a model of the brain that we use with young people too, right? Underneath here, this is the primitive part of our brain. This is the part that was formed first, and then all those wrinkles and layers that you see happen. Well, this top part, right? This is where our advanced thinking, problem solving, conflict resolution, this is all here. But when you're emotionally flooded or moving into fight, flight, or freeze, what happens is your brain flips its lid and it goes into autopilot. And only this primitive part is working. This is not the part that makes good decisions, right? This is the part that if there's a bear approaching you, you don't have time to go through the folds, right? So your brain knows here comes a bear, and your brain is going to tell you freeze, or each is different for each of us. Some people are going to be like, come on, let's go, bear. Some people are going to be like, I'm out of here. But you need that to happen. Same thing happens though. Your brain, your body, your heart, your soul cannot distinguish the threat of a bear coming to attack you. It feels the exact same as when your loved one is talking to you harshly or criticizing you or coming after you. It's that same. So you're going to that. I went on this tangent because, yes, sleeping could help. It could help put the lid back on. Thanks, Trish Flowers, which is Mia and Jax. And texting is not personal. Yes, so true. So yes, going to sleep could help put that lid back on, which will help bring back your reasoning and things like that. But to your point, we don't want to use it as a way to sweep it under the rug, to avoid things. And we definitely don't want to, in the heat of the conflict, it's like, well, I'm going to take a nap, right? Like, that's not going to happen. So it's maybe thinking about it and being thoughtful. Instead, maybe saying, you know what, right now I'm overwhelmed. Can we take a 20-minute break? You can do whatever works for you during your 20 minutes, as your partner can too. Maybe you take a nap, maybe they go for a walk, maybe they watch funny videos. So in that way, yes and no a little bit, right? Any other things you've heard before I start talking about some actual things that can work for us?
I'm frozen, guys. I'm not right now.
You're in
Oh,
your fight, flight, or
what?
freeze. Well, no worries. Things that I want to, as we are winding down, and I want to highlight that actually help when we're trying to manage our conflict constructively. Listening for understanding. We talked about that, right? We don't want to listen. And thank you, LaFleur Flowers. That's my mama. Anywho, so what we don't want to do is, again, be thinking about what I'm going to say next, or I'll be honest and transparent. Sometimes with me, and even though I'm trying to listen for understanding, what'll happen is someone will say something, and what I'm thinking is, I know they didn't. Like, oh, they got me all the way messed up. Who did they? And so now I'm no longer listening to understand you. I've checked out, and I'm in my own headspace. But listening for understanding, here's what I want to say about it. Understanding doesn't mean you agree. You don't have to agree, but can you understand what they're saying? And that goes to what you were saying, Trisha. That's called empathy, empathizing, trying to know what it feels like to be in somebody else's shoes in that moment. And when I mentioned that piece about what if I'm working with someone who's a rapist, I can empathize, and I don't have to agree, right? But I can understand what it's like to be them, and I can disagree. So listen for understanding, not agreement or not to win. Letter writing is great, especially if you, let's say you partner with someone who's like me, where words of affirmation is my love language. I talk for a living. I listen for a living. You could be overwhelming, and you might be like, I can't get my thoughts out as quickly. So writing a letter or journaling or having a chance to get your thoughts out can be really helpful. And then you can refer to that when trying to address the conflict with your loved one. Scheduling a time, we talked about that before. If it's something that's really heated, I mentioned going to dinner. What I was bringing in is a public place. Sometimes that can help us keep our lid on because we're concerned about, being respectful in public. So it doesn't have to be a restaurant. Maybe it's a park. Being in nature helps. It soothes the soul, right? Let's see. Taking notes. What? Yes. Jotting down notes as you are listening to your loved one and they are sharing their complaint. Remember, a complaint is okay. Taking notes. That's furthering making sure I'm listening for understanding. One skill we teach is we'll have a couple take notes. Then when you've let the person talk, then you say it's your turn to talk, and then you repeat back. So what I heard you say was this. Did I get it right? And before you get to say what you think or what your opinion or your rebuttal is, they have to say, yes, you did. Or they might say, close, but what I was really trying to say was this, right? Then you say, okay, so you weren't saying that I was an idiot. What you really wanted to say was that you felt unheard. Okay. Once they say you got it right, you get to move on and then share your points. So these are all some things that can help make it constructive. The biggest point I want to share as we wrap up, don't be afraid of conflict, right? That's probably the most destructive thing that exists in any relationship. We're all so scared of it that we run from it and we do all those other pieces. Conflict is a natural part of life, right? So much. That's why so many things, it's covered in so many areas of the Bible, because you're going to have conflict. You got this. You can do it. Get in there. Anything worth having is worth fighting for. Fight for that relationship with your loved ones, your children, your spouse, your partner, I don't know, your work colleague. Don't be afraid. You can do it. You've got this. And if you ever need help, we're here. Please be sure to visit our page on Facebook, You Plant, We Water, where you can leave comments. You can leave questions. We'll soon have an episode where we're going to be covering just viewer comments and revisiting and kind of recapping. So we hope you'll see us and that you will tune in again soon. Thank you so much.
We're so happy that you guys are tuning in. And again, like she said, please go to our Facebook page, We Plant, You Water.